Today, we'll be discussing how to create your own Dungeons & Dragons campaign. The campaign is something that the characters play through. It's the story, and it's up to the Dungeon Master to decide this story. When creating a story, the Dungeon Master can take existing stories and mold them into his own version, or can completely make up a fantasy creation. The Dungeon Master gets to decide the history, the events, the map, the terrain, everything. When doing this, it can be a little frustrating keeping everything down. So what I suggest is creating a map. Now, here is a good example. This is the map of Skyrim. As you can see, it is not extremely over-detailed. It's simple. It has the landmass, islands, shores are outlined in a darker tone. You have mountains, rivers, holds, towns, different sectors. These are great things to do when creating your campaign, because this makes it much easier to keep track of the different areas your characters will go through. A second thing you need is the individual characters themselves. Characters are important when there are encounters, such as trading and shops. These are things that the Dungeon Master must also create. It is up to him to decide what these characters are like, what accents they have, what they look like, where they're from, what race they are. These are things that a Dungeon Master does through each playthrough of the campaign. So you have the original campaign, which the Dungeon Master must create. Let's say that this is that. Well, he has to decide for his first playthrough what's going to happen, what his characters are going to start out with. This is the beginning stage. After the playthrough, which we'll say is this being the beginning and this being the end, the Dungeon Master must take events that have happened and use them in his next. So he's got to create another, smaller campaign, using the things from this and this to create this. This will then be used for the next. This will be used to the next. The entire time, the way the characters play, the players, they mold the people who you create. This is important because it shows character development and different values that the NPC has for the character, the player. NPCs are important to make your campaign more realistic. Now, one thing you don't want to do is overkill with the amount of events that happen. You don't want 50 different things going on in this hour to 2 hour session that you play. So you want to plan small events. They're tasked to go somewhere. For instance, say that they are issued by the person here to go take out a band of bandits somewhere over here. Well, they're going to have to move over here. And that's going to take a couple of days, depending on how they get there. It's up to you to decide what happens along this journey. Like, crossing the river, they may encounter a bear they have to attack. Or, highway bandits. But it's not just the destination, it's the adventure there. That is what's important. You have to have encounters. So, what I do is I create an encounter to set them back, like a fight, and then something they gain, a boon. So I'll have a series of set events happening until they get here, where their destination is. This is important because if they were to just move here, it wouldn't seem realistic, and it wouldn't be as fun. But if it was just filled with constant combat, it wouldn't be enjoyable. So you have to give the players something that sets them back and moves them forward, balancing it out until the final mission. Another thing that's important is an end goal. The end goal is something you want to reach by the time the campaign is over. For instance, say that there is, going along with the theme of Skyrim, a dragon that must be fought. So, here's our dragon. That is the end game. They have to create different stories leading up to this final boss, so to speak. These are what's important. You must create a link between each of these events, starting where you left off. But each time, the Dungeon Master must take what's happened and add it to the story. And by this time that they reach the end game, you will most likely have played for many weeks. This gives the Dungeon Master time to prepare and create a very realistic and enjoyable boss battle because of all that's happened here. The Dungeon Master molds this story. And that's why it is so important that when creating a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, that you build a storyline, you create your characters, you have a goal set in mind, you make a map, you plan encounters. It doesn't have to be a very gruesome process of planning and building and mapping out every little detail. It can be simplified. It can be made easier. And hopefully, using this video, you are able to better create your own Dungeons & Dragons campaign. This is the Dungeon Master, signing out.